On today's episode,
more and more love. And it's amazing when your foundation is Christ, how much love is poured into you by Christ and how much you're able to then pour that out for others. Be like, yes, I do love you because Christ loves us. And it is just amazing. And that's something that I was missing before. Like, I wasn't just confused, like I was empty. You know, Christ was loving me every day and I was still alive every day and I still had opportunities to serve people, and Jesus loves us more than anyone else ever could. But I mean, the fact that I even survived the hysterectomy, because that was a disaster. Okay, the doctors called it an adventure. It was a little more than an adventure, I'll tell you that. That was bad. But I think it just looks like we just keep living and keep loving. And just stay centered on Christ.
Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Our world today presents people with complicated issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. It can be a struggle to understand or deal with them. We're here to help by bringing good information and a fresh biblical perspective to these matters and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. My name is Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischman and Jeff Samuelson. And today we have part 2 of our interview with Caden Coblentz. If you didn't hear part 1, you may want to listen to that first. In that part, Caden talks about her story. In this part, we're going to ask Caden some questions based on what she has told us. And the first question, we're going to go to Pastor Bob Fleischman.
So where are your parents on all this right now? I mean, how do they were kind of like, you know, when I've heard you on the other podcasts and so forth, they were kind of like accepting and, you know, going along.
Yes, my parents the whole way through the transition were just supportive, but more in a passive way because they didn't fully understand what was going on. I think if they knew what they knew today, back then, it would have been a much different story. But if I only had the information they had at the time to operate with, I probably would have done the same thing as them. Well, we don't have the moral framework, and I don't really know what this issue is, and if you're saying this is who you are. So they were supportive, but not in a way that they were pushing for it. And sometimes they would push against it. They would kind of say, ew, what does this mean? I don't get it. So they weren't pushing against it necessarily, I suppose, but just asking these questions. Katie, did you do your research? Or Caden, did you do your research? Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I told, of course I did my research. I watched it all on YouTube. I did my research. So they were skeptical about some things. And when I was having that hysterectomy and I had those complications, they knew what was going on. And they were waiting for a phone call like, is their kid dead or alive from all this transition stuff? Now they are fully supportive. I think when they can, they'll tune in and listen to the things I do whenever they can. I've done a lot of stuff. Sometimes they'll tag along with me, or they'll just try to listen to it. I think they've listened to almost everything that's been posted online. Some events are private and they've not heard it, so they are very supportive now.
A lot of times our listeners, and I find that a surprisingly large number of them will tell stories of my grandson, my daughter, just sometimes close relative, and a lot of times it has to do with being invited to their wedding, as they're either going to marry somebody same sex, or you get this notice that they're undergoing the change. My sister called and said her son is going to undergo a change and become a woman, or vice versa. And nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what to say. The 2 questions I have for you is, what's the worst thing that they can say? And what do you think is the best thing that they could say?
I'm not sure if there's a worse thing they can necessarily say, so affirming the delusion would probably be the worst thing you can say. But if you're just trying to open up a conversation with a person, there's probably not a worst thing you can say, but there is a worst way of saying it. So the things that I like to tell, so let's start with some of the best things that you could say. Some questions, very open-ended questions. What does transition look like? asked with a neutral tone, not really expecting an answer, but just enough to get the person thinking. What does transition look like? What will the end of transition look like? What is it about womanhood that you despise? Or what is it about manhood that you desire? What duties of womanhood, or what duties does womanhood encompass that you despise? Questions like that, where it's like it gets them thinking, but it also has to pull them out of the ideology. You can't think about what duties womanhood comes with without thinking that there is such a thing as manhood and womanhood. So questions like that in order to even think about them, whether or not you come up with an answer, in order to even think about them, it takes you out of the ideology. Open-ended questions asked with a neutral tone when the other person has opened up conversation. So what this would look like is your 19-year-old son, this is just an example. Your 19-year-old son says, I'm going to be transgender. And the parents, being Christians, decide, we're not going to call you Brittany because that's a girl's name. I'm not going to call you by a girl's name. That's affirming a delusion and it's not good for you. I'm not going to call you by female pronouns because you're not a female. Well, what does the son do? He doesn't want anything to do with the parents, even though that's the right thing, is don't affirm it. But once in a while, the son comes home and it's like, yeah, so this is the next step. Well, what the parents could do, and I'm not saying this will absolutely work, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, and I don't want to give anybody a false hope, but maybe the parents could just very neutrally, well, what does transition look like? And just kind of wait. Well, what is it about manhood that you don't like? This will most likely set the son off. It's, oh, you guys never get it. You guys never get it. Whether or not you ask the right or wrong questions, that's how it's going to go. Okay? Unless you compromise everything you believe in as a Christian and you just go along to get along, no matter what you do or say, it's going to set the trans person off. So he won't even want to talk to you again. He'll be like, I'm leaving. I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving, all this kind of stuff. Probably he was going to do that anyway. But now you've asked these questions, not expecting an answer. You've asked them neutrally, not leading. Oh, well, is it this part of man? Don't lead them into the answer. Just kind of. Then they're going to go home that night or back to their college dorm or whatever it is. And your voice asking that question might play over and over again in their head. What duties of manhood? And they can't shake it. Like, oh man, manhood comes with duties. Like, I'm not just this free-floating individual. I actually have a relationship and a responsibility to others. I can't say that I'll turn their mind around right then and there, but it's probably better than just arguing with the person.
So when somebody says, I'm invited to not even a trans experience, but like a gay wedding or something like that, what advice would you give them? Do they go? Don't they go? Do they buy a present? Don't buy a present? Do they say something or?
So I think that there are different ways to handle it. Sometimes I've seen people, first of all, I would say don't go to the wedding because then you're witnessing to something that is, well, one, it's an abomination, and two, it's a perversion of what marriage actually is. Marriage is actually for something. And two men or two women cannot get married. Marriage is for children. You have children, you educate your children, you raise them in the faith. That's what marriage is for. Now, people get married later in life. People experience infertility. I myself, I don't have a womb. If we have children, we're adopting children. I won't have biological children. But marriages between a man and a woman, no matter the circumstances, people get married later in life. A spouse dies and somebody remarries and they're post-menopause and can't have children. That's still ordered toward, in principle, what marriage is for. It's a man and a woman. So I would say do not witness the ceremony. Some people, some Christians, and I've not been faced with the issue of do I go or do I not go. I've not been faced with a gay wedding or anything like that. So some Christians have decided, I'll go to the reception. It's at a different place. If I get a gift, it will be sort of a housewarming gift if they're just moving in together, or if they've already bought a house and it's your niece and you've already given her a housewarming gift, you might just stop there. So there are different ways to go about it.
But in the end, you're trying to build a relationship.
Yeah. And it's really important to meet people where they are without compromising your own values. So that would be my advice for the gay wedding is, what would I do if I were faced with that? I would not witness the actual marriage ceremony because it's not a marriage ceremony and I won't have a part of it. But if it's somebody close to me, they're already going to be upset about that. But hopefully they won't be focused on that if it's their wedding day. Maybe I'll buy a toaster. Oh yeah, housewarming gift. And you can call it that.
Yeah. Now you've had, you were telling us earlier before we came on air, that you've had protesters, people show up when you've done public or political type gatherings. What is their number one objection to you? What is the thing that seems to set them off?
Welcome to The Balance of Gray. I am your podcast host, Steve.
What exactly is the balance of gray?
It seems to be a rising voice in Christian podcasting. The balance of gray. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not.
It's called The Balance of Gray.
Balance of gray.
And how do we have this peace in a world that's falling apart, distracted with tickled ears in a form of godliness yet denying its power? Because we have the Holy Spirit. And folks, if you don't, Jesus says, behold, today is the day of salvation. Now is your time for redemption. Do not wait on this. I'm telling you, you'll have a peace that surpasses all understanding. Find The Balance of Gray on Apple, Spotify. We're on just about everything out there.
They're set off because I'm basically saying that a transgender identity, well, I am saying a transgender identity is an invalid identity because a person can't be transgender. You can't be the thing that you aren't. And they're usually set off by that. And the things that they're citing to me, they are studies that they conclude that transgender is actually good for people, but they'll only follow people for 3 years. And I say, well, I was happy with my transition for 7 years. What do you say about that? Or they'll talk about disorders of sexual development, where if I'm saying transgender identities are not valid, because they're not, and because that's the truth, and I'm right about it, they will say, well, what about a person who experiences some intersex condition? And they'll kind of go off about how there's different types of males and different types of females. So what they want is this, it's the gender binary. Then I'm like, yep, that exists. There are men and women. They're like, no, there's not. But the ironic thing is they use the gender binary to determine if they're transgender. If a person is biologically female, but doesn't like princesses and instead likes Spider-Man, well, then they're said to be transgender. And they're said to be then a male. So it doesn't make a lot of sense what they come to protest.
That's because it's rooted in emotion.
And I think part of it is if I'm saying things as a detransitioner and saying, yep, this actually happens and it can happen to you and you can detransition and this is a false ideology and a false anthropology and all this kind of stuff, their identity is being attacked. And they feel it as a personal attack. Now, when I was identifying as transgender, I would not have had the guts to listen to a detransitioner speak. So the people who have come just to debate me or whatever they want to do, they're actually probably a lot more courageous than I ever was, because at least they're going and listening to me. I wouldn't have done that. I would have scrolled right past the videos of detransitioners, and I did scroll right past them. So,
thinking about your story again, I was just thinking about, what if somebody were making a movie of your life? And I was thinking the LGBTQ people, if they wanted to make this movie, the trauma of your life that you're trying to overcome was being born in a woman's body, and the climax would come, the happy ending would be when you have successfully fully transitioned. we know more of your story now. But there are lots of Christians, if they were making, let's make the Katie story. That point would be this is the bad thing she has to conquer. And it would, the climax, the happy ending would be, oh, and she realized it was all wrong, and she found God, and she detransitioned, and oh, look, she got married. Everything is happy from here on in. But as Christians, we realize that no, that still is just kind of the beginning of your story. And you've got so much more. Of course, it's, we don't know the ending yet, but the real meat of your story is what follows all those things that we've just talked about. How do you think of it then? As you're thinking of your story then as an unfolding one, what are the things that are important to you and that you really want people to know about?
Well, actually, let me back up just a little bit because I actually really I never thought about if these different sides made a movie about my life. So I just want to say, and I'll say it briefly, the transgender activist side making a story about my life would stop at the end of transition and would just say, yep, that's as far as she went and that's it. Lived happily ever after. And there are a few reasons for that. One is if we talk about detransition, then it's attacking their identities. But there is this idea floating around the internet, and it is more common than you think. And it's more common even when you find out about it than you'd like to believe. And it's called death before detransition, where people who experience transition regret, they would rather die before they detransition. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Either because the task of detransition is insurmountable, it seems, which it did seem like that for me. It is really hard to admit, hey, this big, big, big thing that I convinced everybody I was right about, I was wrong about. Can you trust me to make big decisions again? Mm-hmm. That's really hard. Well, and it keeps the ideology alive if you never detransition. But imagine you spend your time fighting with your Christian parents or family members or just with Christians in general. You're like, this is right, this is right, this is right. And all of a sudden, you have the same realization I did and you start to regret it. I'm not going to give the Christians what they want. I'm not going to give my parents what they want. What would hurt these people more than me being trans is probably me being dead. And so we see a lot of, we see an increase in suicide rates among transgender people post-surgery. And these people are, unfortunately, have died. They've committed suicide, tragically. So we can't ask them, did you begin to regret it? But it is common to start regretting it or to have the effects of the surgery. So there is a death before detrans, and they would just cut my story off right there. And they might even twist the story and say, oh yeah, she actually ended up committing suicide because she didn't have enough family support or something outrageous like that. And that's kind of, and that's what it is you transition and then you die. And there's no room for detransition. And that's just something that's understood. And some of the activists, the people who have been so brainwashed, they're part of that. And they will rather die than detransition and give the other side what they want. They're just so steeped in the ideology. But back to the question about where do I go from this point forward, and kind of, because my story is not over, it's just beginning. I've been a Lutheran for 2 years. I've been back to church for only 2 years. I think that it looks like a lot of what we've been doing. My husband's on vicarage right now, so we're just moving back and forth from the seminary to a vicarage and then back to the seminary and then to a call, God willing, studying the Bible very deeply, which is something that I'm sure everyone's experienced it at first when you first start saying, you're like, wow, this connects to this and this, there's just so many cross references. You're like, well, and then the Hebrew actually means something even deeper. I mean, I'm still breathtaken by a lot of the stuff that I'm learning about. And now I call him my live-in seminarian, who every time I come across something, doesn't matter how many times I read Exodus, I like Exodus. I think most people do. Hey, I have a question. Yeah, what's your question? Yeah, when Moses, I just keep coming up with more stuff, more studying. One thing that we want to do, my husband and I want to do, is adopt children. And we've not decided if that would be infant, domestic or international. Would it be foster care, foster adoption? There's just so many different ways to go. And honestly, we just pray every day that we're open to caring for whoever God places in front of us to care for. And we would really like to have our own children and to be able to adopt. I think that would be absolutely amazing. But right now, God's placed us at a church in Wisconsin, and we love it. There's a preschool, so we're able to love all the children, all the congregation members. We're in a nice little neighborhood. We know some people in the neighborhood. So I guess it just looks like that, just more and more love. And it's amazing when your foundation is Christ, how much love is poured into you by Christ and how much you're able to then pour that out for others. Be like, yes, I do love you because Christ loves us. And it is just amazing. And that's something that I was missing before. Like, I wasn't just confused, like I was empty. And Christ was loving me every day, and I was still alive every day, and I still had opportunities to serve people. And Jesus loves us more than anyone else ever could. But I mean, the fact that I even survived the hysterectomy, because that was a disaster. Okay, the doctors called it an adventure. It was a little more than an adventure, I'll tell you that. That was bad. But I think it just looks like we just keep living and keep loving. And just stay centered on Christ.
You mentioned courage earlier when you were talking about some of the people who came to, protesters and such. I would guess that you were told at various points in your transition, "Oh, you're being so brave to go ahead with this." We see that in the media with, various figures that are held up as, that's so courageous to do the thing that you always want to do. And I'm sure there are plenty of people right now who say, "You're so courageous to be doing what you're doing now." Do you have any thoughts on courage as far as the people who are going to be listening to this or passing on the things that they learn here?
Yes. It took absolutely no courage to transition because everything was set up so well that if you can picture a child's train track, they build with their wooden train tracks, and then the trains have a magnet and they all stick to each other. I play with these all the time at the preschool. The trains stick to each other. When you start transitioning, the train's already moving. The first one's battery operated and there's only 2 more attached to it. They just stick your magnet on there. Oh, you're so courageous. Oh my goodness, how are you still going? I'm not doing anything. I feel like I'm just pedaling downhill right now. I'm doing nothing. I'm just being pulled along. This is the easiest thing I've ever done. But because, the evil Christians, as they'll say, keep trying to stand in the way of it. Oh, you're so brave to stand up to those Christians. What are the Christians going to do? They just tell you, hey, Jesus loves you. You should probably stop hurting yourself. He doesn't like when you do that to yourself. That's all they're saying. And now people do say all the time about how courageous I am now for speaking out. And I will tell you, I don't have any courage of my own. If I had to rely on my own courage, I wouldn't have said a word. I wouldn't have even detransitioned. But I'm able to rely on God and on that courage. Be able to, okay, God, I need courage right now. So, all right, I'll pull you through this. Hop on my train. That's a much better one. So the first time I ever did any speaking event, I was too scared to stand up. It was at a pastor's conference. And right before I was supposed to stand up and speak, I thought I was going to pass out. I had all the telltale signs of, I'm going to pass out. I can't do this.
Well,
But-
some of us feel that way now.
But I stood up and I started talking and all that melted away. And what was the difference? Well, when I felt all those signs, I just prayed and I said, God, I can't do this. If I'm supposed to stand up there and talk, like, you kind of just have to get me started because I'm not going to do it. And I really was going to walk away. Same thing when I first started speaking at more political events. I was with some people in New Hampshire and with Chloe Cole, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share my story publicly yet. The only thing I'd done was the private pastors conference. And I prayed and I said, God, listen, I don't have the courage to just put my story out there. I don't have this go-getter attitude about the detransition awareness stuff. So if you want my story out there, do it yourself. is basically what I said. Real nice of me. Just do it yourself. I'm not doing it. Well, next thing we know, Vivek Ramaswamy's bus pulls up and he wants to do an impromptu interview with the detransitioners. And I just kind of got yanked over to it. And here he is asking me and posting it on his Twitter. And he's a presidential candidate. This was years ago, when he was running for president. He wanted to do it. And I was like, well, all right. We'll call that an answer to a prayer.
I do just want to ask too, we do have pastors and I mean, obviously, lay people too that attend congregations and stuff too. What was it that was super helpful that your pastor said and everything too? And I mean, especially to just even hearing you walking into a Lutheran church, I don't know. I mean, in my mind, I'm picturing maybe a smaller church or a lot of elderly people, or, this is not maybe some people maybe could get lost in the shuffle in a large non-denominational church. What was your perception walking into Lutheran Missouri Synod Church and your connection with the congregation and then your pastor?
My home church, it's not as ornate as a lot of churches that we see. So especially not coming from the Catholic tradition. But then I went to these big churches that really didn't have much going for them at all. It just looked like an auditorium. So I walked, there's some stained glass windows, very nice ones, by the way. I do like the stained glass that we have there. But it's a newer church. It was a church plant. It's been rapidly growing since the 90s. But it's a young church in that the congregation has not been a congregation for a while. But we have old people and we have young people and we have families, and we have some families have kids in college, some families have kids in preschool. And I'm not sure what our numbers are for a Sunday service, but we had 2 services, maybe a couple hundred people. So it was big enough that if I probably couldn't have been anonymous because they're all so close to each other. They're all so friendly. And I was like, at the Catholic church, you can just walk in and sit in the back and walk out. No one will ever know who you are. But at the Lutheran church, I didn't have that option. I had to meet people. They were all standing in the narthex talking to each other. Hey, how's it going? They love each other. So that was a little bit of a shock to me, because then I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to have to actually make friends here. It was really easy at first to say, I want to go to a church that won't affirm my delusion. But then when I was actually there, and every Sunday morning I would walk in, hey, Katie, hearing my birth name, Katie, was like fingernails on a chalkboard. I would walk in, I'd have to brace myself before I opened the door to the narthex, because people would greet me with my quote unquote dead name, is what they call it, the name that you have before you transition. And church was the only place I was doing that. And that's because my pastor, he encouraged me gently, but then when I started doing it less gently, to just try using your old name. Try just being Katie, just at church. You don't have to tell your parents. You don't have to tell your friends yet. Let's just try it here. He compared, because when I went in there, I was feeling like, look at all this damage I did to myself. I'm irredeemable. I can't get anything back from, I can't get my womb back. I can't get my breast back. None of this can be restored. So can I still be saved? And he's saying, well, when we talk about issues, mostly about the 6th commandment, it's like, well, let's compare it to a couple who tragically experiences a divorce. And, these sins that are sins, but I was seeing as lesser. It's like, oh, well, it's not as bad to get a divorce or a gay marriage or things like that as it is to transition. And he was like, no, sin is sin, and let's call it what it is. But people rebuilt from that. And that was a really helpful thing. And also, so that's what my pastor said. And my pastor is a great pastor. The priest who I went to confession with actually told me, and I think sometimes this might be controversial, but as Lutherans and as Protestants, I think we do overcorrect a little too much, is he pointed me to Christ, of course, and he pointed me to Mary, the priest. And he said, Mary, the Mother of God, is your best role model. And I still think that that's true for Christian women, that everything we do, like Mary, should be pointing to Christ. And what's the last thing that we hear from Mary is, do whatever Jesus tells you. And that's kind of, and that is a really good role model for women, okay?
Well, Katie, lot of really good stuff here today. Thank you so much for talking with us. I mean, really, it's a huge blessing to have you to be able to share your story. I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, "Yeah, it's got to be like 1 in a million people that would happen to." I mean, but it's really. It's really a beautiful story. And like Jeff said, too, I mean, one that isn't done yet as well. So thank you. If people want more information or want to get in contact with you, what's your advice?
That's actually a really good question. I've been doing, if you're part of a congregation and you would like me to come and speak, because we've been moving a lot and seminary life is really busy, I've dialed it back a bit. But if people do get in touch, I think if your congregation wants me to come, I like to speak to congregations. I do breakfast, I do dinners, whatever people want. You want to have a women's breakfast and have me come speak, that's fine. Or you just want to have me, come speak during the Sunday Bible study. I'm usually open to those sorts of things, though if I'm being a little pickier with it, it's nothing personal. It's just, it's hard for us to get away on weekends these days. And what I typically will do, really, however, the people want it to be structured at the church, is I can do a 20-minute talk with like a 2-hour-long Q&A. I can do an hour-long talk with a 15-minute Q&A, or I could just kind of come and we can have a conversation about this stuff during the Bible study hour. I've done it all sorts of ways. So I'm super flexible with it. And if it's hard to get a schedule going with me, I apologize in advance. Yeah. It's hard for me to schedule everything these days.
If anyone is listening and wants to get in touch with Caden at all, please reach out to us. You can find us at lifechallenges.us. Send a message to us, and we'll be happy to share that information with Caden. Thank you so much again for joining us. And we want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you have any questions on this episode, also, you can reach us at lifechallenges.us, and we'll look forward to having you back next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're here to help, so if you have questions on today's topic or other life issues, you can submit them, as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us, or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. You can find past episodes and other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so please check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.